My name is Cody Wilson. I direct a group called Defense Distributed. We gained notoriety in 2013 when we developed the world's first downloadable printable pistol that anyone in the world could fabricate. We called it the Liberator.
3D printing a gun is at the intersection of law, politics, guns, and technology, issues that are really just prone to emotivism and affect more than hard reality. If it was possible to 3D print a gun, we thought it would become a kind of cultural, what do you call it, a postmodern brouhaha, and it did. I believe, first of all, that there is a kind of objective irony that watches over all of us, and that objects can have their own strategies, independent of like the laws that we decorate upon firearms or upon data. It doesn't really matter what we say they must do. They kind of carry out their own destinies at a certain point. So we knew that if the file could be created, that it would live on, and that acts to suppress it would only kind of popularize it. We wanted it to be first that internet thing, and for it to then be translated as a cultural kind of event. And now the duty is fidelity to that event, to continue with its legacy. And this just happened in the UK, I think, yesterday or the day before. The Manchester police, they go on a drug raid and they see some air rifles and a MakerBot replicator, Have we found the UK's first illegal 3D printed gun factory? It's a kind of Rorschach test of, especially of the central planner, like to see guns where there weren't any before, to make of them where they before could not have been, to tease the regulatory imagination into its own kind of suicidal terminal spin. And I mean that specifically because there is, I think, a way to tempt this overwhelming systemic power into feeding on itself now. It's become too much. I'm talking post the Snowden revelations, right? We recognize finally that we live in a global surveillance apparatus, a global warfare apparatus. Maybe we can all kind of agree to these principles. But the closer that system becomes to a totality, the easier it is at any single point, I think, to introduce a catastrophic process or to create a kind of point of failure. So the internet itself is, I think, I don't want to say the word like milieu or whatever, but I think the internet can be a libertarian's implement. The internet can be complicit with your strategies. I think radicalism, or at least a particular practical form of radicalism or activism, can be taught from what we did and is necessary at something like this.
There's this idea that, if people are given freedom, that they'll produce guns and tear civil society apart. I don't know, man. I think we have yet to really see the proper reactions from these nation states. Canada just now has launched an inquiry into 3D printing. I mean, the show, in a sense, is just getting started. I don't think there will ever be an armed conflict or the need for one. I think the forces of soft domination operate differently now. Direct popular manipulation through media channels and the kind of gradual, what is it? It's not on the tip of my tongue here, but eventually you give up the rights yourself. They're not forcibly taken from you. This kind of popular manipulation will be what tends toward our total domination, if we want to imagine that scenario. But sure, certainly in some respect, this bolsters and at least proves that it will be totally undoable for a government to operate a program of mass gun confiscation or something. I think this system tempts you, though, into thinking, well, I can resist by force, and maybe there's a legacy of that in the United States that people want to return to nostalgically, but I think the system wants you to think that way. I mean, there's other ways of resisting and operating around, and I know the project confuses some of those impulses, but it's meant to inspire you in a more kind of symbolic dimension and direction. Don't just think, well, now this is the gun I can use to shoot, the bureaucrat. No, it's kind of something else, right? It speaks to a more a bigger diffusion of power generally, emboldened by technology.
This is now the dominant paradigm of all nation states, of all sovereigns, right? To declare states of exception and to basically prohibit all forms of human activity. What herd animalization it's called. The liberal institutions have now lapsed into herd animalization. You will always be just bare life. You will need to pay to have your positive freedoms. And we can see this trajectory on into infinity if we don't somehow radically alter what is possible or achievable. In different, I'm not going to say it's not worthwhile to go into banking or it's not worthwhile to go into lobbying. Obviously, very worthwhile, and you will have gains, and you have had gains, like you talked down Canada from the Arms Trade Treaty. I'm not saying those things aren't worthwhile, but there's a parallel track where you don't just have to change a culture per se. You can wrest what is achievable from what was said to not be. And this is like Rancière's definition of politics. We took the 3D printer and said, no, it can do this too. And it doesn't matter how much they vote about it, It doesn't matter what they say. It can do that.
In some sense, in revolutionary acts, we redeem failed revolutionary or thought or deeds from the past. And so in the past, in World War II, the OSS developed this psyop called the Liberator. And it was these stamped metal pistols developed by GM, and they would take them and they would drop them, they would airdrop them by the hundreds of thousands over occupied Europe. And the idea was, well, yeah, this would be good for civil resistance fighters, but at the same time, it would be like a severe morale damager for the occupying forces. There might be a gun anywhere, where anyone could. The guy right behind you might have a little pocket pistol. So I just thought that was to harness that mood and that operation and kind of recast it in what we were doing would be to both express what we were doing well and give it historical reference, but also redeem the original thought there, which was never quite completed. So we took that moment and I think properly executed it. Now the gun is in the internet, forever.
How can we change the coordinates of what is actually achievably possible right now? And just in the case of that 3D printer, I swear to God, that's the most impractical gun you could ever make if you make a Liberator pistol. I swear to God. All right? I've had more for you. Hey, you haven't seen me swear in the dark, with that thing. But I mean, it was enough to make it work once, in front of a BBC camera, right? To use the old nodes and arms of this octopus media empire, right? To spread to the corners of the globe that now you could 3D print a gun. That was worthwhile.
Yes.
That was worth doing.